So in comparative politics and in other types of social and, of course, behavioral sciences and all the sciences, we're going to start off with a research question. This is what's known as our dependent variable. So you need to know this sort of the lexicon of political science. So the dependent variable is the research question. The theoretical answers, the hypotheses that we have for what might account for the change in that dependent variable are known as independent variables. Okay, so the research question is called the dependent variable. The various answers, possible answers to that, plausible answers to that, are called independent variables. Okay, so those are our explanations. And then, of course, we test them. To use the comparative method, which we'll talk about in more detail in a moment, we have a variety of things that we can use. We can use intra-country case studies. We could look, for example, at one country and say, why in one region do they do this, in another region they do that? Okay. We can look at inter-country case studies, so we can look at two or more countries. We can look at lots of countries, a few countries. And then we can use inter-country statistical studies, where we're using lots and lots and lots of countries. Okay, so these are the basic uses these are the basic ways that we use the comparative method. Now, there are two basic research designs, and we'll come back to quantitative versus qualitative issues later. The first one is a most similar systems design. Here, you use cases where all but one of the independent variables are the same. Okay? And you expect to find the dependent variable to vary based on this one independent variable, which is sort of your chief hypothesis, if you will. Okay? It's your main thesis. And the other ones are sort of alternative explanations that you're trying to test. Okay? With the most different systems design, you use cases where all but one or maybe two of the independent variables are different, and you expect to find the independent variable to be similar based on this one independent variable. So let me talk, and this might help if you jot it down as I say it. Okay, we're going to talk about a most similar systems design in a sort of laboratory setting. Okay, here again you're using cases where all but one of the independent variables are the same, and you expect to find the dependent variable to vary based on this one independent variable that's not the same. So think about this lab experiment. We want to find out what accounts for cholesterol, okay, high versus low cholesterol. Okay, and my hunch is that if you eat Cheerios every day, just like on the box, it says you're going to have lower cholesterol. So I want to test that. And I think, what are some other reasons we might have higher versus lower cholesterol? And I think, well, maybe it's diet more broadly. Okay, maybe if we eat chicken versus red meat, we're going to have higher versus lower cholesterol. Maybe it's exercise. Maybe if I run a lot, my cholesterol will go down. Or maybe it's about wine. Maybe I can just sit back and have a glass of wine a day and my cholesterol is going to go down. Okay, so here we've got independent variables. My first independent variable, which is what I really think is driving this variation in cholesterol, is Cheerios. Okay, so I1, independent variable 1 is Cheerios. My second independent variable, I2, would be diet, more broadly. So my third, I3, would be exercise. And my fourth, I4, would be wine. Okay, so you take a sample, okay, and you split them up into two groups. And let's say that they're roughly the same age, or we've got the same differences in age. So we've got 5 people between 30 and 35, 5 between 40 and 45, et cetera, in both the groups. Okay, so they're evenly split from that perspective. Demographics, other things, men and women, equal mixture in each one. Okay. Now, what we're doing is we're testing for these various hypotheses. So with respect to I2, we'll come back to I1 in a second. With respect to I2, okay, and this again was diet. We're going to have everyone, we want this to be the same, so we're going to have everyone eat turkey sandwiches for lunch and, steak for dinner. Everyone's going to do that. With respect to I3, we're going to have everyone run 4 miles a day. Maybe 5. Let's make them run 5 miles a day. And with respect to I4, we're going to have everyone have a glass of wine every day. 1 glass of wine every day. So all I2, I3, and I4 are the same for both groups. I1, though, is going to differ. For the first group, we're going to say, you're going to eat Cheerios every day for breakfast. The second group gets Egg McMuffins every day for breakfast. Okay? So that's the only thing that differs. Now the question is, do we see a fall in cholesterol based on this one independent variable, the only one that's not being held constant. Okay, the others are being held constant. They're the same. And so let's say we go through a year of this, and lo and behold, people who were eating Cheerios have lower cholesterol than the other group. Well, we know it's not about diet. We know it's not about general diet. We know it's not about exercise, and we know it's not about wine, because those things were the same for both these groups. There's strong support for the theory that Cheerios bring down cholesterol. Okay, so thank you, General Mills, or you should be thanking me. A most different systems design. Look at your I1, I2, I3, and I4 again. This time, we're going to have all but one of the independent variables differ. Okay, so this time, for example, we split these groups, again, the same way we did before, but I1 is going to be the one that's the same. Okay, that's the only one that's going to be the same. So for this group, we're going to have each of these two groups are going to eat Cheerios. Okay. With respect to diet, we can have one group eat turkey sandwiches and chicken at night. Turkey sandwiches during the day, chicken at night. The other group will eat tuna salad sandwiches and hash browns at night for dinner. Okay, that's a bad example. Okay, with respect to diet, one group's going to run a lot. The other group doesn't have to run a bit. Okay, with respect to wine, one group can have wine, the other group can't. Better yet, let's just make it all random. We don't care if you have wine or not. We don't care what you have in your diet. Okay, we don't care if you run or not. That makes it even better. Completely throwing everything out the window. The only thing that's the same, the only thing that's going to be the same among these groups is that you have Cheerios every day. And so, after a year, we go back and we look. And if indeed, even though they had different amounts and different influences with respect to diet, with respect to exercise, with respect to wine consumption, if all of their cholesterol fell, then we can be pretty sure that there's support for this Cheerio theory, that it's Cheerios that are possibly driving it. Okay? We've controlled for the other variables. Now, if not, well, then it might be something else. Okay? And then we have to go back to the drawing board and rethink our hypotheses. Okay, so now let's look at this research question from a political science perspective. And before we do, I want to make a couple points. First of all, correlation is not causation. Yes, there might be a relationship between the variables, but we can't say that Cheerios is what's driving this. We could say that there's a high likelihood, or that there's some evidence at least, that Cheerios might be driving this, but we can't be sure that Cheerios are what's driving this drop in cholesterol. Okay? And then the other point is that we never prove anything. Okay? We just find support for something or support against something. We never prove or disprove anything. This is very important. So, looking at the second research question I'll come up with, what accounts for ethnic violence in states? Okay, a standard political science sort of question. We can come up with various theoretical answers to this. Okay, so I want you to write these down, and I've done the thinking for you. Okay, but what you want to do is you want to think about things that might rationally lead to ethnic violence. And so I've thought about this long and hard, and I've come up with a handful of things. The first one, the one that I really think is what's driving ethnic violence, is poverty. So this is my I1, poverty. And the argument, because there has to be an argument behind it, is that a lack of resources among one group compared to another leads to clashes between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves tend to be the rulers of one ethnic group, and the have-nots tend to be those of another. Okay, so this is why I think poverty accounts for ethnic violence. But I've gone through the literature, and I've found arguments that say other things. So the second independent variable, I2, that I'm going to write down here, is geographical distribution of the minority. Oops, sorry. And so here are all of them. And the idea here is that if you've got a concentrated minority, in one area, lots of this minority, we should expect violence to be more likely. Okay, ethnic violence is going to be more likely because it's easy for them to take up arms, versus if they're scattered all over the place and they have very rare contacts with one another. Okay, The third independent variable that I throw out here is the size of the minority. The argument being, if you've got a large minority, 35% of the population, it's going to be easy for them to get together and to fight. Versus if it's a small minority, maybe 3% of the population, they're not going to be able to come together to fight. It's going to be, they're going to think it's too hopeless. And finally, the fourth independent variable here is institutional incorporation of the minority. Okay? The argument is that if you have special seats reserved, for example, in Parliament, that the minority has a voice, and they have no reason to use violence because they have a voice in the system. They have a stake in the system. If there are no seat reservations, if there's no chance for them to gain access to political postings, then we're likely to find more violence. Okay?